It's 3:47 a.m., April 22, 2025. In the dark waters east of Taiwan, the USS Ronald Reagan's radar screens light up like a Christmas tree. Incoming contacts. Dozens. Then hundreds. The missiles are already in the air. What happens in the next 3 weeks will shock military planners, terrify policymakers, and change everything we thought we knew about American military power. This isn't speculation. This is what happened when the United States military, top defense experts, and congressional leaders ran the most extensive war game simulations ever conducted on a conflict with China. They ran it 24 times, with different strategies, different scenarios, different choices, and in nearly every simulation, America won. But the cost. The cost was something no one was prepared to accept. This is the story of the battle simulation that shocked everyone. U.S. Navy versus China, the battle simulation that shocked everyone. To understand what shocked the military establishment, you need to understand the game. In early 2023, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the same think tank that accurately predicted how a coronavirus pandemic would spread 6 months before COVID-19, decided to do something unprecedented. They would make classified-level war gaming public. For decades, the Pentagon has run countless simulations of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan behind closed doors. The assumptions, the casualties, the outcomes, all hidden behind walls of classified clearances. But as tensions between Washington and Beijing reached heights not seen since the Cold War, CSIS made a radical decision. The American people deserved to know what military leaders already knew. They assembled a team of retired generals, naval strategists, and defense analysts. They gathered every piece of publicly available data on Chinese and American military capabilities. And they built the most detailed simulation of a Taiwan invasion ever created outside classified walls. The scenario was simple, but terrifying. It's 2025. Taiwan holds a referendum on constitutional independence from China. Beijing sees this as crossing their ultimate red line. For 1 month, the People's Liberation Army masses troops, landing ships, and aircraft along China's eastern coast. The United States repositions its Pacific Fleet. The USS Abraham Lincoln and USS Ronald Reagan carrier strike groups move toward Guam. Japan watches nervously. The world holds its breath. And then, in the pre-dawn darkness, China strikes first. The opening move in the simulation wasn't subtle. China unleashed what military analysts call the world's largest missile magazine, thousands of precision-guided ballistic and cruise missiles, stored in underground bunkers across mainland China, all programmed with one mission: destroy America's ability to intervene. The targets weren't just in Taiwan. They were in Japan. They were in Guam. They were anywhere American forces might launch a counterattack from. In the simulation, U.S. military bases in Okinawa came under immediate attack. Guam's Anderson Air Force Base, home to America's strategic bombers, was hit by waves of missiles. And in the waters around Taiwan, Chinese submarines and surface ships created what one participant called a steel curtain of anti-ship missiles. This is modern warfare. Not soldiers storming beaches under covering fire, but mathematics. Missiles against missiles. Computers calculating intercept probabilities while sailors and pilots wait to see if they'll survive the next 60 seconds. And in those first hours of the simulation, the casualties mounted fast. The game's rules were brutal in their realism. Every missile had a probability of hitting based on real-world weapon performance data. Every ship had actual radar ranges and defensive capabilities. When a simulated missile got through the defenses and struck an American destroyer, that ship's crew faced realistic casualty estimates. Hundreds of American service members died in the first day of the simulation, before a single shot was fired back, before a single U.S. aircraft even reached the battlefield. It was a shocking reminder. America hasn't fought a peer adversary since 1945. We've grown accustomed to wars where American forces operate with impunity, where the enemy can't touch our bases, where our ships sail unchallenged. That era, the simulation showed, is over. Explosions and damage control scenarios. But America didn't just sit back and absorb the punishment. The simulation showed the U.S. military adapting, improvising, and hitting back with overwhelming technological sophistication. Within hours of the Chinese missile barrage, American submarines, already positioned in the Pacific, began stalking Chinese amphibious assault ships. These vessels, packed with thousands of Chinese Marines destined for Taiwan's beaches, became priority targets. And here's where the simulation revealed something crucial. China's invasion fleet was vulnerable. Catastrophically vulnerable. While China has built the world's largest navy by ship count, it has exactly one mission that requires crossing 100 miles of open ocean while under fire: invading Taiwan. And the simulation showed again and again that American submarines and long-range anti-ship missiles could turn the Taiwan Strait into what one admiral called a graveyard. The U.S. strategy that emerged from successful simulations had a name: Hellscape. It meant overwhelming the invasion beaches with swarms of drones, air, surface, and underwater. It meant firing salvos of long-range missiles from bombers operating out of Guam and Alaska. It meant Japan allowing American fighters to use their bases for round-the-clock strikes on Chinese ships. But here's the problem that shocked the simulation teams. America started running out of missiles. See, the U.S. military has been engaged in counter-terrorism operations for 2 decades, fighting insurgents in the Middle East, launching precision strikes against individual targets. That kind of warfare doesn't consume massive quantities of advanced missiles. But a war with China. The simulation showed the U.S. burning through its entire stockpile of long-range anti-ship missiles in less than 7 days. 1 week. That's it. Mark Canchin, one of the simulation's designers, put it bluntly in the report. The United States would likely run out of some munitions, such as long-range, precision-guided munitions, in less than 1 week in a Taiwan Strait conflict. And without those missiles, American ships would have to get closer to the Chinese fleet. Much closer. Well within range of China's massive arsenal. The pattern became clear. America and its allies were winning, but at a cost that made the victory feel hollow. In 19 out of 24 simulation runs, U.S. and allied forces successfully prevented a Chinese occupation of Taiwan. China's amphibious fleet was shattered, 90% destroyed. Over 138 major Chinese warships were sunk. The invasion failed, but the American butcher's bill was staggering. 2 aircraft carriers sunk. Not damaged, sunk, at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Between 10 and 20 major U.S. surface warships destroyed. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, Ticonderoga-class cruisers, the backbone of American naval power. Between 200 and 400 American aircraft lost in combat. Fighters, bombers, surveillance planes, and over 3,000 American service members killed in action in just 3 weeks of fighting. Let that sink in. 3,000 dead. In 3 weeks. For comparison, the United States lost approximately 7,000 troops over 20 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. This simulation projected losing half that number in 21 days. One simulation participant, retired Lieutenant General David Depschala, described reviewing the casualties. It's sobering. It's the kind of losses we haven't seen since World War II. Taiwan's casualties were even worse. The island's economy was devastated in every scenario. All 26 of Taiwan's destroyers and frigates, their entire Blue Water Navy, were sunk. Taiwanese military casualties exceeded 3,500. And the island's infrastructure, power plants, ports, airports, was left in ruins. Even in victory, Taiwan would face years, perhaps decades, of economic recovery. Japan, America's crucial ally, paid a heavy price for allowing U.S. forces to operate from their territory. The simulation showed Japan losing over 100 fighter aircraft and 26 warships as Chinese missiles rained down on Japanese self-defense force bases. And China's losses were catastrophic enough to potentially topple the Chinese Communist Party. 10,000 troops dead. The amphibious fleet in shambles. The modern navy that Beijing spent decades building, destroyed. The humiliation of failing to reunify with Taiwan after starting a war. The simulation concluded that losses on this scale could destabilize CCP rule itself. But here's what shocked American military planners most. Even in victory, the United States was crippled. With 2 carriers sunk and dozens of ships destroyed, U.S. naval dominance in the Pacific would be shattered for years. America's global military posture, the ability to respond to crises anywhere in the world, would be severely degraded. One simulation report stated it plainly: the United States might win a Pyrrhic victory, suffering more in the long run. It determined whether America won or lost in these 24 simulations. The analysts identified 4 critical factors. 4 things that had to go right, or the invasion succeeded. Factor 1. Taiwan must resist on its own. Immediately. In the scenarios where Taiwan's military collapsed quickly, where units surrendered or failed to hold the beaches in the first 48 hours, China established what's called an irreducible lodgment. A beachhead that couldn't be eliminated. The simulation's brutal conclusion: there is no Ukraine model for Taiwan. Once the war starts, it's nearly impossible to supply Taiwan with additional weapons. Whatever they're going to fight with, they need to have when the shooting starts. That's why the US has been urging Taiwan to stockpile anti-ship missiles, drones, and defensive weapons now. Not next year. Now. Factor 2. The United States must use its bases in Japan. This was non-negotiable. In every scenario where Japan refused to allow US forces to operate from Japanese territory, America lost. The distances were simply too great. US fighter jets couldn't reach the Taiwan Strait from Guam with enough fuel to fight and return. The simulation showed that without Japanese bases, the US couldn't maintain air superiority. And without air superiority, American ships couldn't survive in the waters around Taiwan. It's a heavy political burden to place on Tokyo. Allowing US forces to strike Chinese targets from Japan would make Japanese cities legitimate targets for Chinese retaliation. But the simulation was clear. Japanese cooperation was essential for American success. Factor 3. The United States must strike targets inside mainland China. This was perhaps the most controversial finding. To win, American forces couldn't just defend Taiwan. They had to attack the source of Chinese missiles. That meant striking missile storage facilities in mainland China. It meant attacking Chinese air bases. It meant potentially targeting command and control facilities deep inside Chinese territory. In scenarios where the US tried to keep the war limited by not attacking the Chinese mainland, Chinese missiles continued to rain down on Taiwan and US forces indefinitely. The war became a grinding stalemate. But attacking mainland China carries enormous risks. It's an escalation that could lead to anything, including nuclear weapons use. And that brings us to Factor 4, the munitions crisis. Remember those long-range anti-ship missiles running out in a week? That wasn't the only shortage. The simulation revealed that US stockpiles of Patriot interceptor missiles, SM-6 surface-to-air missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and even basic ammunition were woefully inadequate for sustained high-intensity combat. The United States has been supplying Ukraine with weapons for its war against Russia. It's been replenishing Israeli missile defense systems. And now experts warned that the cupboard was nearly bare for a Pacific conflict. Admiral Samuel Papero, commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, told the Brookings Institution in 2024 that conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine were eating into critical munitions stockpiles needed for a China fight. The solution: ramp up American defense production immediately. But missiles aren't built overnight. Some systems take years to manufacture. The components, the specialized labor, the testing, it all takes time. Time that, in the Davidson window, the period from 2027 on January 2023, they sent shockwaves through Washington. Congressional committees immediately organized their own war games. The House Select Committee on China ran a simulation in April 2023. The results were even worse than CSIS's findings. In their scenario, the United States struggled to prevent a Chinese victory. Representative Mike Gallagher, the committee chairman, told reporters the exercise was a wake-up call to arm Taiwan to the teeth before any crisis begins. The problem was that by 2023, Taiwan was already waiting on nearly $19 billion worth of American weapons that had been approved for sale but not yet delivered. 66 F-16 fighters, HIMARS rocket systems, hundreds of anti-ship missiles, all caught in a backlog caused by supply chain issues, COVID-19 disruptions, and the strain of supplying Ukraine. The Pentagon launched urgent initiatives to fix the munitions shortage. Congress authorized billions for defense production expansion. But the defense industrial base couldn't flip a switch and start churning out missiles at wartime rates. It required building new factories, training new workers, securing supply chains for rare components. And all of this assumed peace held long enough to prepare. The simulations publication also changed the conversation about China. For years, debates about US-China policy focused on trade, human rights, and regional influence. But the war games made the military dimension impossible to ignore. Chinese officials responded angrily to news of the simulations. Lu Pengyu, a spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington, accused the U.S. of using war games to support and embolden Taiwan independent separatists and further fuel tensions. But behind closed doors, some analysts wondered if Chinese military planners were running similar simulations and coming to the same conclusions: that an invasion of Taiwan would be catastrophic for everyone involved. There's a principle in military strategy. The purpose of wargaming isn't to predict the future. It's to deter war by revealing its true costs. And the cost revealed by these simulations was horrifying enough that it might actually prevent the war from happening. The simulation showed the world what a 21st century great power war would look like. Not a quick, decisive campaign. Not a surgical operation. But a bloody, grinding, industrial-scale conflict where victory and defeat become almost meaningless terms in the face of the human and economic devastation. Seth Jones, who directed the CSIS project, put it this way: how do you effectively deter if you don't have sufficient stockpiles of the kinds of munitions you're going to need? The defense industrial base is not prepared for the security environment that now exists. So what did we learn from the battle simulation that shocked everyone? We learned that American military dominance, the kind we've taken for granted since the end of the Cold War, is not inevitable. It's not permanent. And in the Taiwan Strait, against a determined Chinese military, it would be purchased at a price we haven't paid since 1945. We learned that wars between great powers aren't won by the side with the most advanced technology or the biggest defense budget. They're won by the side that's prepared to endure, to manufacture, to sustain operations when the munitions run low and the casualties mount. We learned that alliances matter. That Japan's decision to allow or deny U.S. basing rights could determine the outcome of the entire war. That Taiwan's willingness to resist in the first desperate hours could be the difference between sovereignty and subjugation. And perhaps most importantly, we learned that transparency matters. By making these simulations public, by showing the American people and the world what the real costs would be, the analysts at CSIS did something remarkable. They gave policymakers and citizens the information needed to make informed decisions about war and peace. Because here's the thing about deterrence. It only works if the adversary believes you're prepared to fight. And you're only prepared to fight if you've done the hard, unglamorous work of stockpiling munitions, hardening bases, and training for scenarios you hope never happen. The simulation's final recommendation was simple but urgent. The United States needs to strengthen deterrence immediately. Build more missiles. Speed up weapons deliveries to Taiwan. Harden bases in Japan and Guam against missile attacks. Make it clear to Beijing that an invasion of Taiwan would fail, and that the attempt would cost China everything. But there's another message in these simulations. A message for anyone who thinks modern war between major powers would be quick, clean, or winnable. It wouldn't be. It would be chaos. It would be blood. It would be thousands of young Americans and Chinese and Taiwanese and Japanese people dying in service of political decisions made by leaders far from the battlefield. And even if one side won, both sides, and the entire world, would lose something irreplaceable. Eric Hegenbottom, one of the CSIS simulation designers, was asked how he copes with spending his days thinking about such dark scenarios. He smiled grimly and said, "There's a reason why I sometimes go home and watch comedy specials after work." These simulations weren't entertainment. They weren't fear-mongering. They were a gift of strategic clarity in an age of dangerous ambiguity. The question now is, will we heed their warnings? Will America do the hard work of deterrence? Will Taiwan prepare its defenses? Will China recognize that the cost of invasion exceeds any possible benefit? The future of peace in the Pacific, and the lives of millions of people, may depend on how we answer those questions. The simulation showed us the future we must avoid. Now we have to choose whether we're wise enough to avoid it. Because the most important victory isn't on the battlefield. It's the war that never has to be fought.